100 episodes, gentlemen. I'm proud of us.
Yeah, if I had remembered, we should have planned something better, but oh well, we just had an episode.
That's the us thing to do.
Yep.
That totally is, and that's exactly what we did because we're us. But sometimes I like to think that we can be better than us, but nope.
Actually, that should be the pre-show right there.
Feel free.
It sets expectations, exactly what you're going to get.
It was a fine show. It was a reasonable show. It was a regular show.
We're live. Hi, everybody.
Oh, we're very excited. Is that because this is episode 100?
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm excited.
I thought about that like a week ago that we were coming up on 100, but I didn't remember it tonight. Well, so this shows we're just a bunch of dudes who don't remember important dates. So we all forgot. We all forgot our own birthday.
No, Casey remembered. Just me and you, John. We forgot.
Yeah, I guess.
So Hypercritical made it to 100 asterisk. What did Build and Analyze get to?
108, like Lost.
Oh, okay. So if we make it to 101, then we have unequivocally done better than Hypercritical. Is that fair to say?
That's not how that works.
Well, okay. I should have said better. That was a poor choice of words on my part. Thank you for keeping me honest. We have perhaps completed more. Can I get that from you, John?
Completed more episodes? Yes, that's what it means when one number is bigger than another.
You're the worst.
I mean, we technically have already completed more episodes because there was that one that was just like the promo that was for the movie thing. And then there was the one that me and Merlin did when John couldn't do it, which isn't really a real episode of Hypercritical.
It's a real episode if it's got a number and it's got a title and it's in the RSS feed. That's as real can be.
Well, but it didn't have you on it.
Doesn't matter. It was called Hypercritical. It had a number. It had a title. It had a page. It had show notes. It had everything that that an episode has.
I did think that was, I mean, I haven't listened back, but at the time I was actually very happy with how that turned out. It didn't feel like Hypercritical at all, but I was very happy with it. I wish Merlin like had a tech show. And maybe it's better for everyone, including him, that he doesn't, that he instead just like makes parts of his other shows tech when he has something funny to say about it. But he is so good with the tech stuff, so incredibly good, and provides a voice for it and opinions for it that we really don't hear from other people. And I always feel like we're missing that, you know?
If by good you mean makes me want to yell into the podcast. Yeah, the best is when they do it on Roderick on the line. You hear the two of them together talking tech just makes me want to throttle them both.
Oh, I love it. I think it's the best. That one they did like 3 or 4 episodes ago where like the whole first half was about tech was amazing.
All right. So the Showbot is semi-broken.
Just like old times.
Just like old times, jerk. Do you want to...
Is this a clip show?
Yeah, right. Well played.
Our 100th episode spectacular.
Would you like to wager a guess? What happened?
Did you not properly non-retain the closure to set timeout, so the memory leaked all over the place?
No, that's a good guess, but no. And I should say that I have not knowingly changed any of the code with relation to the Showbot specifically.
Are you now going to rewrite it in Go?
No, but it is slightly tempting.
Honestly, you probably should. It's a fun exercise.
If he writes it in Go, his site will pay him money for hosting. It'll go negative instead of being free.
That's quite possible. No, that is not the case. So here it was, I was thinking about making this big, grandiose speech about how it really isn't so terrible relying on third-party code because it allows you to do things that are kind of cool. More specifically, earlier today, I decided that I was really tired of not being able to use Markdown footnotes in my site because all the cool kids use Markdown footnotes. I want to be a cool kid. The particular module or whatever that I was using was called Marked, and it's an NPM module or package, I think is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, and so I swapped Marked for Markdown It, which is a different package that also parses Markdown. And I was all excited with myself because now I had Markdown footnotes. The problem then that I ran into then was now on my main page, which is the only page that I can think of that has more than one complete post on a single page. What happens when I have 2 posts that both have footnotes? because they're both generated in isolation, and so they'll reuse the same anchors. And so then I had to go through a humongous song and dance, which ended up being simple at the very end, but I tried like 34 different iterations to get to the simple answer of what to do and how to make unique each of these markdown footnote anchors. So I got that accomplished. Well, what I didn't think to do was check the Showbot, specifically the page that's hosted on my regular site that handles the Showbot, and see what the ramifications of this markdown parser switch would be. And it appears, for those of you who are not listening live, if this actually makes it in the show, it appears that somehow it is emitting escaped HTML only for the links section of the Showbot page. So I'm seeing all the titles just fine, but the links are just the HTML header for the table and nothing else. So, oops. Sorry, everyone. All right, good talk. All right, that was our 100th episode spectacular. Hope everyone was happy.
Yep, I guess the show's over now because we can't go past 100.
Something like that.
We are joking. The show is still going on.
Everybody relax.
We've sold ads past 100, in fact, well past 100, so we have to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. All right, so let's do some follow-up. And I'd like to start with some very quick anecdotal thoughts about using USB ports. So we talked last episode about... Why is that so funny?
And then we're going to watch paint dry.
Oh, come on. Give me a chance here. So last episode, we talked about how on the potential iPad Pro / MacBook Air, that there's theoretically only going to be one USB port. It's USB Type-C port, and whether or not that's a big deal. And particularly John and I were going back and forth as to whether or not that's a big deal. And so I thought to myself, well, let me ask my family, because they're normal computer users, and see, okay, does anyone actually use USB ports? Because one of the things I was thinking during the show, and hopefully explained during the show, was, hey, we have a lot of technologies now, like AirDrop, for example, that may obviate, I think that's the word I'm looking for, that may obviate the use of USB keys. And there's a bunch of other examples, Bluetooth for mice and keyboards. So I asked my family, what do you use your USB ports for? And Aaron and my mom both said, well, I charge my Fitbit that way. Well, that's something you could find other means for doing that, but that's a reasonable answer. And Aaron also has an iPod Shuffle. And so she said, well, I also, load things onto my iPod Shuffle that way. And obviously that's not a big deal for a phone, but for an iPod Shuffle, you're really out of luck otherwise. My immediate younger brother, I have two younger brothers, my immediate younger brother, who is a real adult and works in the video game industry, actually, said that he typically uses his USB ports for keyboard, mouse, iPhone, and USB key, oftentimes, but not always simultaneously. And my youngest brother, who is studying out in California, he's doing a master's, he said, and I'm quoting, "I don't have enough and I have 3. So he was saying that he uses his for a mouse, of his phone, and oftentimes more than one USB key, and additionally, at least one external hard drive. So it appears that my theory that really you don't need USB ports, maybe not so solid after all.
Well, I think, I think you're seeing, I bet there's like a big bifurcation of the market here where if I had to guess, I would guess that what you have here is a pretty good representative sample, actually, just by luck. I mean, I don't think your family is like the most average family ever made, but I think I think like if I had to guess how it was, I would guess this is how it is, which is that most people use very few of them, and the primary reason they use them is to charge things that charge over USB, phones, right. Fitbits, some cameras, stuff like that. Like charging things over USB, I think is a big thing. Especially in recent years when so many devices have become chargeable over USB. And for that, you don't necessarily need to be using a port on your computer for that, although it is convenient because your computer is right there on your desk and it has these ports and you don't have to take up more outlets. So, and you don't have to bring so many adapters on trips. So it is definitely convenient, although it isn't strictly necessary. And then you have the people like Brady, your brother, where 3 ports is not enough because he has lots of devices. This will apply to a lot of people, who have a bunch of peripherals, who have a bunch of disks, who have a big desk setup with external keyboard, mouse, disks, maybe other stuff. Like, if you have like a big setup where you're parking the laptop all the time, you're going to need more than that. In which case, no number of ports on a laptop is going to be enough, and you're going to be using a hub. Now, things that are attached via adapters or hubs are inherently less reliable than built-in ports most of the time, in my experience. And as we move towards computers that have fewer and fewer internal devices and ports, I think this is going to keep being a problem. Fortunately, the need for many of these things is also going away as this transition happens. But you might not need an Ethernet port anymore because you just use wireless, and especially on a laptop where that's probably very frequently the case. Whereas, on a desktop, you need some of these things. Now, what I'm not looking forward to is a world in which you have this one port on the computer, and then you just have to plug in some random hub from Amazon from God knows what manufacturer with God knows whose chip inside of it. That has some weird cheapo power supply that's going to flake out and get all weird and start causing weird, hard to diagnose errors for the things that are plugged into it, or intermittent failures for things that are plugged into it. I don't want to get to the point where I'm dependent on some cheap USB hub from Amazon and trying to find the best one that actually will work, because I have that now, and there's a certain subset of devices that I will only plug in directly to the computer ports because the hubs just are never that reliable. And please don't email me saying, I bought this hub, but it's perfect. Because if you look at every hub, I've looked at all of them, and all of them have mostly reviews that say this is perfect, and then a bunch of reviews saying this flaked out on me, and it seems like they're all basically the same. I bet the number of actual manufacturers of these things is probably pretty small. The number of chipsets they use is probably even smaller. So it's just the kind of thing, being dependent on the random PC peripheral hardware market for your stuff to work properly is not a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if Apple was going to do this thing where it's one port, and if you need more, you can always have a hub or a breakout thing, at the very least, you would think that Apple would have to sign itself up to make a high quality one of these that works, because I have problems with hubs all the time too. And in addition to the things you just mentioned, some things just plain not working, some things being flaky. The worst, of course, is if you have a drive attached to a hub, because the last thing you want to be flaky is your connection to a drive, especially if it's your backup drive, and who knows what it's doing over there. But then also sleep-wake issues, where either it won't go to sleep with the hub attached, or won't wake with the hub attached, or the hub will wake it up because something will tickle it, or it'll fire off a little thing and it will make the computer think you've plugged in a USB device when you haven't actually. So many problems, and the only way Apple can sort of defend against them is that we sell. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, because the Thunderbolt display I had, all the problems I had were associated with the ports that were in it. It was effectively a big giant Apple-made hub where you plug a Thunderbolt cable into your computer and the power thing, because it's actually powering your computer too. And out of it, you get Ethernet, USB, FireWire, all these ports. And that was the problematic part of the display, not the display part. But if that's going to be their solution, they should make one, and they should test that one and make sure it works, and make sure computers sleep and wake with it. And when I say that, I'm thinking they can't even make sure their computers sleep and wake with nothing attached to them reliably. So that, sleep-wake problems are, evergreen when it comes to all laptops, and Apple laptops, I think, are the same as any other in that area. So, yeah, but aside from all the reliability concerns, I still come back to the convenience angle, which is why the whole point of the thing is supposed to be convenience, and in the absence of some other reason, why not put another one on if it can fit?
All right. So let's talk about reclarification of context for the 12-inch Air, John.
Yeah, the discussion we had, there's a lot of feedback about it, a lot of tweets, and these aren't all tweets that were happening while people live tweeting while they listen to the show. To clarify again how we were discussing the 12-inch Air, we weren't making any judgment about the validity of the rumors. We didn't spend any time, and I don't think we should spend any time discussing how likely is it that these rumors are true, that Apple will make this device or whatever. We were just considering the rumored device as if it was real, and saying if Apple made this, would it be something that we would want? The only thing we did about validity, and I think it's that the main thing you should do about any rumors is is it technically possible? And we covered that straight away in the last show. And that's important because it's the easiest way you can deal with rumors. Like, obviously, you don't know everything, but if someone says that Apple is going to come out with like a Mac Pro the size of a penny that'll be 10 times faster than the current model, and it's coming out this year, you can dismiss it because you know it's not technically feasible. Like, and there's a range that, like, if a rumor has a date or a technology or both, you can, like, Apple's going to drive all of its ports over the headphone jack. Well, we know that's not possible, and barring some crazy thing that we've never heard of, and if there's a crazy thing we've never heard of, it's probably bad because it would be proprietary and Apple only and whatever. But yeah, everything else about it, we weren't making guesses about it. And then I was getting a couple of bits of angry feedback from people, mostly tweets. And when I listened back to the show, I realized what they were all yelling at me about. Like, I wasn't responding to their tweets because I didn't understand what they were angry about or like worked up about. And it was the part of the episode where I think Marco or Casey maybe was like, what if the rumors are for like, an iPad Pro and a 12-inch MacBook Air? And I said, these are not two separate devices. That was a reference to the iPhone keynote, but I said it like emphatically, like Steve Jobs says it in the keynote.
These are not three separate devices. This is one device.
For people who haven't memorized every second of that keynote, it's a thing that Steve Jobs said when the iPhone was introduced. And watch the video and it will make more sense. But it sounded like, if you just listen back to it, it sounded like I was super emphatic that these are not two separate. I don't know if they're two separate. It's just a stupid rumor. It was making a joke.
Even we got that, and we don't get anything.
Yeah, well, if I'm going to make a reference that you're going to get, it's going to be about the iPhone keynote, right? It's not going to, yeah. Pop culture. So we didn't even talk about iPad. I mean, we've talked about iPad Pro in the past, things, whatever. But because that story had renderings of mock-ups of this rumored product, and that's what we talked about. Those renderings, those mock-ups, those rumors.
Right. And the only reason I said that I was suspicious whether this was two separate devices is because, like, the rumors over the last few months have been all pointing towards two 12-inch Retina ultra-portable devices from Apple coming at about the same time. And I thought, that the same size display, the same, like, all this stuff, like all these rumors, all this smoke around this, there's probably fire behind it. It's like, is this really going to be two different devices that are like the exact same size that are radically different from each other? Like, I was skeptical of that. I remain a little skeptical of that, except that I've heard from so many people who claim to have knowledge of this. And it's all, secondhand hearsay, all this stuff. But so many people who claim to have heard authoritatively that, no, this is really two separate devices.
Yeah, well, we just got to wait for the 9to5 Mac story with mock-ups of the iPad Pro, and then we could talk about that, too. Because, like, I mean, there are rumors everywhere. And, like, the reason we discussed the 9to5 Mac one is because it was an interesting rumor, at least. And 9to5 Mac's track record is reasonable enough that we're not just like picking some random thing from some website and saying, somebody said this, let's talk about it, because there are a lot, and again, because it was technically feasible, because it's a great rumor that takes advantage of like known technologies that we have, like the USB 3, the connector, and what the bus can carry makes new hardware designs possible. So it's inevitable that Apple will use that connector in interesting ways on its future Macs, and this rumor is one possible way they could do it.
Our first sponsor this week is our friends at Squarespace. Squarespace is the best website builder out there. I've used many of them, and I've built my own websites plenty of times. And, in this day and age, building your own website, most of the listeners to this show have probably built a website before somewhere else, like either through some kind of CMS or building it from scratch, building your own CMS, whatever the case, building it statically using Microsoft Front Page 15 years ago, whatever the case, you probably made a website before. And there's a time and a place for making it yourself, but the percentage of times and places where that's the best answer for you keeps getting smaller and smaller because things like Squarespace exist and are very good. So we use Squarespace for this podcast site. I could make a podcast site CMS. It would be terrible. It would offer none of the features that Squarespace does, and it would not be the best use of my time. And I've wanted to make a podcast CMS for a while, but I keep thinking, like, as much as I want to do that, why should I do that? Because Squarespace works just fine, and it has so many other features that I'm never going to be able to match. And I think that is overall, like, for geeks like us, I think that's the core Squarespace message is, like, yes, they know you can build your own site. They know you have the ability to build your own CMS or host something somewhere else. But they also are confident that once you see the features they offer, once you see how easy it is, if you're building it for somebody else, once you see how easy it is for that other person to get help and to keep it running without having to bug you constantly for support, it's a no-brainer. They have all these beautiful designs you can start with. They're all responsive mobile designs. They keep up with the times. They're fashionable. They use JavaScript and dynamic stuff wherever it makes sense to. Everything about their site, it's clean. Again, it's responsive. All this great stuff. Your site looks like your site, and it's customizable. You can customize everything, the colors down to the fonts, the sizing, the blocks, where the blocks go, how big things are. You can even inject your own code if you're that geeky and you have a little nitpick, like, I don't like the way this happens when I resize it, or I don't like this one little element. Where you can inject your own CSS or JavaScript and actually modify the page right there. They also have all this new stuff with Squarespace 7, integration with Google Apps. They have a partnership with Getty Images where you can just buy a stock photo right there in the app for $10 and insert it as background, header, post image, whatever you need. This huge partnership with Getty, all these fantastic quality images. They have cover pages, which is now back in fashion, and you can do a really nice job very, very easily with Squarespace, where you have like a big splash page when you start up. If you want to have an intro, or if you want to promote some special event going on or something you just launched, you can do that really easily. All this in a beautiful design, very easy to use, but yet very powerful. They have 24/7 support via live chat and email. All this starts at just $8 a month, and you get a free domain name if you buy a year up front. They also have commerce, built-in store functionality. Oh, it's so great, and all that's no additional charge also. Anyway, start a free trial today with no credit card required. This is a real, genuine free trial. They don't ask you for the credit card up front and then bill you if you forget to cancel it. Not like that. A real, no strings attached, free trial. No credit card required. Start building a website today. If you are curious about it, if you don't believe me when I say that this is better than building it yourself most of the time, try it. They let you try it for free. You can just start something. You poke around, make a fake website, make a real website, whatever the case is. Just try it. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, please use offer code ATP. That will tell them you came from here, and you'll get 10% off. So once again, go to squarespace.com, use coupon code ATP for 10% off. Thanks a lot to Squarespace for supporting our show. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere.
Okay, so John, would you like to tell us a little bit about Hypercritical back in the day?
Yeah, that's another person reminding me of shows I did that I've forgotten. This is Jason Becker.
Wait, is Hypercritical follow-up carrying over to this show?
Yeah, more or less, because people keep reminding me that, like, hey, you talked about something on Hypercritical that's relevant to what you're talking about in ATP, and revisit it. Hypercritical I was talking about is probably one of my blog posts at Hypercritical about things getting thinner. I think at the time it was about the iMac, because people are upset that the iMac was super thin or whatever. But it's relevant to the rumored 12-inch Air, because the whole deal with the 12-inch Air is like they just keep making it thinner. And Marco was talking about, like, why you got to taper it? We've talked about this before. Like, if you don't taper it, you can fit way more battery. And what does the taper give you? That's another example of, like, give me the reason for this. The reason I would imagine for the taper is perception of thinness and possibly weight. Those are the two, like, because the taper does make it feel like, wow, look at this razor edge type thing. It feels thinner than a uniform, and making it actually be thinner reduces the weight. Still, maybe there's room for a non-tapered version to get more battery, but we don't know what the battery life is of this fictional product anyway, so we have to wait to see what it's like. But it always comes back to that question that we talked about with the phones. And I've always said that even though it's frustrating that they don't expand the line to give a model that is a little bit thicker and a little bit heavier in exchange for battery life, but just rely entirely on third-party, battery cases and stuff, or, third-party recharge extra battery packs and other stuff they sell for laptops that you plug into it on a long plane flight or whatever. Why do they keep making them thinner? Why? And why do I support that idea? And one of the reasons that I supported it is, I think I have to find this post on my website and put it in the show notes. That if you just keep making them the same thickness and keep making the battery bigger and just keep finding things to do with the space available to you, like, oh, we can use an even hotter GPU, and now that the power of everything's gone down, we can, we have so much extra power budget, we can make the battery life even longer. And, you could do a lot if you stayed within a similar size. But if you do that, you're never going to learn how to make things really thin. And it's not like, 5 years from now, someone's going to be ready with some new technology. Like, wow, with that technology, we can make a laptop, even thinner. And you just can't, you won't have the expertise to jump from your half-inch thick laptop to the one that's the thickness of a credit card or whatever. It works better with that analogy when you talk about phones. But I think that was the analogy I was using, is like phones keep getting thinner. And it's like stupid. Soon you're going to be able to bend them. Like we got the bending issues with the iPhone 6 and everything. And they start becoming thin enough. You're like, geez, we're going in the wrong direction here. We just need to stop. You don't need to stop. Actually, you need to just keep going and go through and, until your phone ends up the thickness and weight of a credit card. And then when you drop it on the ground, who cares? Because if you drop a credit card on the ground, nothing happens to it, right? It's flexible, it's thin, it's lighter, it's more durable, but you're not going to get to your phone that is so light and thin and durable that you don't even care about it. You're never going to get there if you keep making your phones the thickness of the original iPhone and you just keep adding more CPU and RAM and battery to that thickness. So this, I think, is part of the march of progress. And as it relates to the MacBook Air, rumored 12-inch, or even just any of the MacBook Airs that are out now, why do they keep making that thinner? What are they aiming for now? I think part of it is weight, because as Marco found out with the iPad Air, even though weight is like, oh, who cares? A couple grams here, a couple grams there. For things that you either hold all the time, like the iOS devices, or carry around a lot, from room to room or put in your backpack, there are little thresholds of weight. I think, speaking of Merlin talking about tech, Merlin has discussed this on his podcast a few times, how once you pass a certain threshold of weight, he doesn't notice when that Apple hardware is in his backpack. Like he says, he notices more when if he brings his Leatherman with him, like a metal tool. He notices when that's in his backpack, but he can't even tell, is my iPad mini in there or is it not? And the MacBook Air could be getting to that thing where it's not a factor of like, oh, you remember it used to be like, oh, I'm going to have a laptop in my backpack. I don't want to lug that big thing around. MacBook Air has already kind of crossed the threshold of like, it's not a big thing to lug around, but you kind of know when it's in there. And if they keep going along this path and making it thinner and keeping with the taper and making it lighter, they will eventually run up into a durability issue, because you can't make aluminum that thin because it doesn't spring back like, say, carbon fiber would. And then they got the screen problem there, especially if you use glass anywhere in it for flexibility. But they're approaching a place where they'll have to do some materials redesign. So within the current materials they're using, they're just trying to keep going thinner to get the expertise of like, how thin can we make this? How much can we remove? What is actually essential? Now you got to get Johnny Ive in his white world talking about this stuff. What is essential for a laptop? Do you need a keyboard and a screen? How about just a keyboard, no screen? The MacBook Shuffle. That's what I'm still thinking about these things, which is why I'm not dinging them for so much for why do you got to make it so thin. The port thing, I complain to them, because if you think you need any ports, why would you have one of them and not two? And so on and so forth. We'll get to, there's another follow-up item about that, but I just wanted to follow that up because, hey, I talked about an Hypercritical and I actually blogged about it, and it is relevant to this rumors of this fictional product.
There was a really good post on Six Colors, Jason Snell's new website, with research help from our friend Stephen Hackett, with about Apple solving for X with battery life. And the gist of the post is, if you look, Apple has clearly decided like what the right level of battery life is for iPhones and iPads, and they've kept it fairly consistent, or at least within a very small range. iPads are like exactly the same, and iPhones are vary a little bit more. But it's clear, like, Apple has decided through research or experimentation or just thinking, whatever they think is best, they've decided clearly, like, we don't need more battery life than this in this device type. And so any savings we get from advancements in technology or manufacturing, we can apply to other areas, like making it thinner and lighter. And I think it's so obvious when you look at this that, okay, of course that's what they're doing. That's what they have been doing. And so looking at this, I think it's pretty obvious that the quote MacBook Stealth, or whatever this thing ends up being called, that's probably not its name, but whatever this thing ends up being called, if it's real, I think it's pretty obvious that it's not going to be a quantum leap forward in battery life. It is most likely going to, they're going to apply those savings towards thinness and weight. And I agree, John, with what you said about, like, we do need to make progress in those areas over time. I do think, though, like, I don't know anybody who has an iPhone who is extremely satisfied with its battery life most of the time.
You do now. I have an iPhone. I am extremely satisfied with its battery life.
You've had an iPhone for like a day.
I know, but this is how part of the reason I didn't have an iPhone is because I don't really, need one. But now that I have one, I am completely satisfied with its battery life. Like, I can forget to charge it for a day and I'm fine. I go 2 days with it. Who who uses an iPhone who goes 2 days with it? It doesn't mean that it's not appropriate, as I said before, for Apple to have a model of phone that does a different trade-off for people, or people who do use it heavily, who do barely get through the day on a charge. There should be a product for them, but the current battery life is fine. And I think in their little graph, they showed like an uptick for the, I think it was for the 6 Plus that had the big uptick, but I think even,
Yeah, the 6 Plus is the only big jump on it.
but the 6 was up a little bit too. I mean, we've talked over the past year many times about the same exact thing, of how they hold the battery life constant and then make it thinner if you can. And Marco, you were saying that like they've decided that's the best for the. I don't think they've decided anything like that. I think that's the battery life they have. And when they made a follow-up device, there was a mandate: no regression on battery life, make it thinner if you can. And that mandate wavered on the iPad 3. Again, we've discussed this many times. And so that has been their mandate. But I wouldn't wager too much on them deciding the same way that like they decided like, oh, this size for the iPhone is exactly the right size. No, that's just the size they made it. Seemed like a good size at the time. Later they tried it taller. That was all right too. And then they made it bigger. That's all right too. Like it's up for grabs, right? And I think the battery life on all the products being held more or less constant is simply a matter of the follow-up product can't be worse than the one that came before. But if you try to make it better, all the areas that you can make it better, battery life seems like the last on the list. Like you're not going to regress. You got to make it at least the same because the new phone's got to be better than the one that replaces it. But we can make it better in CPU and GPU and screen, in the interface, in cheapness to manufacture, durability, like all these different categories. And battery life is like, just don't regress. Like it seems to be pretty darn low on the list of things they're prioritizing. And I think those are reasonable priorities, again, for the reason I talked about with the thinness, and also because faster CPUs and GPUs sell phones more than battery life. You just need to make one model that has a decent battery, Apple. I guess maybe the 6 Plus is that model.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear that that's their answer. No, but I think, similar to your argument about thinness, where like we have to make progress gradually over time to eventually have like a major step forward, in total. You can apply the same thing to battery life, and they have made incremental progress over time, but it really has been fairly incremental. And part of this is just because battery technology changes so incredibly slowly, and like we're not going to have
compared to the silicon technology base. Not that it changes that. I mean, it changes, and the speed is fine. It's just that compared to almost every other component, what you can do with those phones. The screens are just like twice as good, 3 times the resolution in the lifetime of the phone. The batteries have not gotten 3 times as good in the lifetime of the phone. It's just the different rates of technology change.
Right. But like, and if you look at the laptops, their battery lives have gone up substantially over the last few years, where it wasn't that long ago that like a 5-hour battery life was top of the line under the most ideal conditions only. And now we're up to, 7, 8, fairly regularly. Although I've never gotten that, but that's could just be because I buy the big 4-core models. I don't know. Anyway, with battery life, where things get interesting, where you get like, really interesting shifts in what this enables you to do is when you have a really big change in battery life. When all of a sudden, like if your laptop, if you don't need to be plugging it in all day, like if you can actually work on battery all day and not worry, like not have range anxiety, not worry about bottoming out and having to go plug in, like if you can treat it actually like if your laptop genuinely has like 24-hour in use with Wi-Fi battery life, then that enables uses, that enables freedoms that you might not have before, or that you couldn't really count on reliably before. That's where things get interesting, is when you can make jumps like that. And over time, eventually, maybe we'll get there. I hope, maybe. But if you look at the way Apple does these jumps, it doesn't look like getting there is a very high priority. Eventually they might get there like accidentally, but it doesn't seem like they're pushing for that. And I think that's a lost opportunity.
I think the rumored 12-inch MacBook is an indication of how they might make the next step on that. Because as we said, like when they have this extra capacity, like, the batteries aren't getting better that much faster, but what is happening is that every other component that's in the laptop gets lower power, and that's how we get like the current good MacBook Airs that have, better battery life than the old ones did. But for this rumored thing, this could be a way they make sort of a larger step forward. It's like, well, the batteries aren't really getting that much better, but some in the back of some designer's mind, hardware designer or Johnny Ive or both, they have the idea of, well, our components keep getting, but our screens, even though we went to the Retina 5K iMac screen, is actually lower power than the previous screen. Eventually, they're going to get decent OLEDs in these things, and you'll have an even bigger drop, especially if they make their entire interface black. Lots of the components are going down in power usage, but somebody has in the back of their mind, can I just rip everything out of this freaking notebook and just have like a tiny little 2-centimeter square that's the whole laptop, and then just fill the rest of it with battery? Like, what can I pull out of this laptop? Well, you got to have a keyboard and you got to have a screen. All right, what else can I remove? Can I remove everything except, can I remove all the ports? No, you can't remove all the ports. We need someplace for power to go in. We need something like, how about I remove every single interface except for one low power USB 3 thing I can get rid of, if they could have I think they got rid of audio in. I know they have like the hybrid cable that like the headphone jack is the input thing, but I'm still like,
well, those don't offer audio in anymore. Sorry, I should clarify on most hardware. The iMac does have audio in. The Mac Mini has audio in, but the laptops, as far as I know, the laptops don't have audio in anymore.
I mean, that's not really probably a power savings, but maybe like with the chipset or whatever, like they want them to be like the phone, where it's mostly just a giant battery in a case with a screen, and then off to the side there's this tiny little thing that is the entire computer. And if you look inside the MacBook Air, as you watch the battery slowly eat the rest of the computer over the past few years, it used to be like a board inside there, and then the board became like two little skinny things, and it's just like it's running away from this giant battery that's eating it. And one of the ways you get power savings back is just to be merciless about what you remove. I guess we should probably skip to that follow-up item because it's related to this. Troy Gall wrote in with some reasons of like, I kept asking for what do I get with one port that I don't have with two? Why would they do this? Is there a reason that we can think of? And he's got two guesses for reasons. One is related to power, but in a slightly different way that I was talking about. I'm like, well, maybe two means you can't have, like maybe ripping out the port means ripping out the supporting chipset because the one port is like, I don't, if there's some large gain that's not just like incremental, like it's, you don't need supporting machinery behind it to have two ports. The one port wires directly into the thing without a control. Who knows? I don't know what the details might be, but
no, it isn't about, it is almost certainly not about controller logic inside. It's about the amount of power that port could draw by its own spec. So if you have like FireWire devices, I think could draw like 10 watts or something like that. So, and USB is, I think, I don't know, something. So anyway, it's like if you have multiple ports, you have to, like, the laptop has to be able to supply the maximum power draw to each of those ports. So it has to have a power supply big enough, and et cetera.
But that just shortens the battery life if you have something plugged in. Like, I don't think they're optimizing for the everything plugged in battery life. I think they're optimizing for the battery life with nothing plugged in. Like, that's the life they're going to, whenever they show battery life, they're not saying with a bunch of drives sucking power, self-powered spinning hard drives sucking power from all your ports. Like, it's always with nothing. So I'm thinking, is there some passive power, that you need other components? Anyway.
No, I think it's more like, because if you have the port that can potentially draw 10 watts or whatever, then the power supply circuitry has to be bigger, the power brick has to be bigger, the total power draw and thermal output of the laptop has to be higher.
Well, the peak power, but yeah, there could be some passive loss to the larger supply or whatever. But his angle on it is that if you had two ports, he thinks that they would both have to support charging. Like if you're going to charge through it, and then maybe that would be more complicated electrically, and that would be the complication. I would imagine that if they have two ports, they would be perfectly fine so you can only charge through one of them. It would be the one with the little like chargy symbol silk screened on it and laser etched stuff that no human being can see without being 2 inches away. And his second thought was there's no room for more ports because the keyboard goes edge to edge and you need space for the key travel, and they're putting the port in the one place where it can be, where it doesn't interfere with the keys going up and down, but the thing's so damn thin. That doesn't explain why you can't have one on one side and one on the other. And the headphone port, I feel like you could shove that. From looking from these fake mock-ups of a product that doesn't actually exist, it seemed to me that there was room on both sides to have one USB on both sides and still find a place to wedge in the thing. But that's like you're not constrained by a predefined case or a mock-up rendering. You get to design the product. If you're going to go keyboard edge to edge, fine. Like move it down an extra 3 millimeters to make room for the Anyway, I don't find any of these reasons particularly convincing, but they're at least new theories.
Our second sponsor this week is Igloo, an intranet you will actually like. Igloo is built with easy-to-use apps like shared calendars, Twitter-like microblogs, file sharing, task management, and more. It is everything you need to work better together in one very configurable cloud platform. Go to igloosoftware.com/ATP to sign up. Igloo is an intranet you will actually like that is free for up to 10 people and very reasonably priced once you go past that. They have responsive design. It works perfectly on all your devices. iOS, Android, and BlackBerry all supported fully as well. They built their document renderer and their annotation engine all with HTML5 so that even that will work. All these dynamic features, the commenting features, the annotation features, that all works even on smartphones and BlackBerries. It'll work with whenever Apple releases new devices, new size devices. It works great on those because it's fully responsive. You can review documents. You can post project updates. You can even change admin settings or you can do pretty much anything you can do on Igloo. You can do from a mobile device as well. It's really mobile first design, fully responsive design, perfect for all that stuff. You can customize the look and feel. And when you customize that, those customizations also carry over to every device because it's fully responsive and integrated with your design. Even in the past, I don't think this has been updated in a while, but in the past, Gartner put them on their Magic Quadrant for social software for 6 consecutive years. So I'm guessing when that comes out next, I bet they're still going to be on it. Alongside tech giants, including Microsoft, IBM, Google, VMware, Salesforce, and SAP. In this report that valued the viability of the vendor, Gartner praised Igloo for their responsiveness and customer experience. To quote from this report from last fall, feedback from Igloo's reference customers was consistently positive. They praised the product's quick deployment, configuration, and customization flexibility with their self-serve options for non-technical users, control over branding and information organization, and ease of use. They also praised the responsiveness of Igloo as an organization. So anyway, if your company has a legacy intranet built on SharePoint or old portal technology, you should definitely give Igloo a try because I've never heard of anybody who said they love their intranet before they used Igloo. And once they use Igloo, I hear very good things. So Igloo is free to use for teams of up to 10 people. So really, if you're a small company, you have nothing to lose. Just go try it. Even if you're a small department within a big company, go try it for your department. See if you like it. Sign up at igloosoftware.com/ATP. That's igloosoftware.com/ATP. Thanks a lot.
So we're going a little long on the follow-up, but I want to try to trudge through all the 12-inch Air stuff.
Episode 100, all follow-up.
Yep, it probably will be, and that would be fitting. So do you want to talk, I think this is mostly aimed at John. Do you want to talk about what Phil Compton said to us?
There's a couple people who talked about the rumored 12-inch Air as it relates to Chromebooks. And you mentioned it, wasn't you, Casey, in the last show? Talking about Chromebooks. Well, anyway, the whole idea with Chromebooks, people know it's like a laptop that it's like the network computer all over again. It's a laptop where the laptop itself doesn't have everything important on it. Everything's on the cloud. The laptop is just a local cache, and it's super simple and super cheap. And they like them for education. And it's like, oh, if your Chromebook just falls off a cliff, whatever, get a new one, plug it in, sign in with your Google account, all your crap's there again. It's a really great idea. The videos that Google has shown when they presented it or whatever, like it's essentially the future of computing, and Apple and Google is there first, and it's lonely there because it's not ready yet, right? Yeah. So, but there's two angles on the Chromebook. People like the Chromebooks for the elimination of all the headaches that come with like owning and maintaining a computer, to try to move it more towards being a disposable type thing, which obviously is the opposite of the way Apple designs things, more or less. And the second aspect of it is they're so damn cheap. Like, remember the netbooks from a long time ago. Oh, everyone loves netbook. Everyone loves cheap things. Of course, everyone. And it's like, well, Apple needs to make cheap things to compete, but that's not how Apple competes. And we went around in circles about that. But the network book and the Chromebook seems to be bringing the issue back again. I think the people who learned the lesson in the netbook era are fine, but now there's a new crop of people who weren't around during the network thing or have forgotten, who are saying Apple needs to come out with a $300 laptop. If they don't, the Chromebook is going to eat their lunch, and education, they're going to take over the education market because schools are cheap and they want cheap laptops. And, you know, the Chromebook is less expensive than iPads, even if you're buying iPad 2s and all this stuff. And yeah, so there's a lot of angles for when you see a small, thin, light thing, you're like, oh, that's going to be Apple's competition with the Chromebook. And every time someone tweeted that at me or sent feedback related to Chromebooks, all I could think was, Apple's going to compete with the Chromebook with a product that's 4 times the price, or maybe 10 times the price. I mean, like, we didn't talk about pricing of the rumored fictional product here, but do any of us expect this laptop to be less than around $1,000?
No, I mean, Chromebook started about $200, right?
Right. So it says like it's 5x the price. Like
I'm guessing $1,500 start.
Right, but and it's the other thing. It could be even more expensive, like because of the thinness. Like, that's just not how Apple works. Like, I don't think anybody thinks this rumored 12-inch Air is going to be some super duper cheap thing. Like maybe it'll be cheaper than the current Air somehow, possibly because of all the crap they rip out of it. That's conceivable. But is it going to be $200? No. And so it seems crazy to me to talk about competing with Chromebooks with a product that's not in its price range. Like that, no matter what you think about competition, it's very like there's no sense in saying this compete. It's like saying that my Honda Accord competes with the Ferrari. Like they don't. There is no competition between them. You can't entertain thoughts of competition between them. They're in a different market. And no matter how much you think that, Ferrari really needs to answer for the new Honda Accord because the Honda Accord is going to eat up their market for no, they don't. They're just, what do you mean answer with? I said, well, actually, the new Ferrari, I think that the new Ferrari is Ferrari's answer to the new Honda Odyssey. How is it Ferrari's answer to the new Honda Odyssey? Well, I know they're not, the pricing is multiples of each other, but I really do think that's their answer. No, they're not comparable. So anytime I see the word Chromebook in relation to this thing, again, it's a rumored thing. I don't know. Maybe it will cost $200. That'd be great. I'll buy 3 of them, right? But I really don't think it will.
You wouldn't even buy one. You'd complain about the price.
Yeah, I don't like laptops, but
exactly. See, there's no way.
Until there is at least a pricing rumor about this, I don't think it's important. I do think that Apple's competition is the idea behind the Chromebook, and perhaps I think this was Casey. Was it perhaps like their answer to this? Yeah, you were going on the whole thing of like, oh, we don't need ports anymore. We need to remove complications. Everything can be wireless or whatever. That is eventually the future. It's just not quite the present, and people buy computers they want to use in the present. And so in the present, you can remove every single port from a laptop except for USB. You totally can do that. And by the way, someone just an hour ago tweeted us a picture showing us USB Type-C with DisplayPort going over it. I don't know how many times we have to reiterate this. Yes, it's not a made-up crazy Apple thing. You can send DisplayPort over USB Type-C connectors. It's part of the spec. It is not...
And it can power Retina 5K. It has enough bandwidth for that.
Right. And just look up the spec. We'll try to put it in the show notes. They show you the pinouts. They show you what goes over those pins. This is not a crazy proprietary Appleism. This is an industry-wide spec. It is not speculation that we're saying this is technically possible. It really is technically possible. It's a thing. Soon you'll be buying products with it. Anyway, because I don't know why people keep sending us these things to show us the display can go over. Yeah, we know. We said so. Anyway, it's baffling to me. So I do think Apple has to eventually have an answer to the idea behind the Chromebook, but I think it's also, for now, it is trying to field products that fulfill needs that do the Apple thing. They're premium products. They charge a premium for them. They make a lot of money. They're fancy. They're nice, hardware-wise. We're all talking about here, and thus far, Apple has not shown any interest in trying to compete with the various other companies that sell similar devices for massively lower prices. And I don't see anything in this rumor that makes me think it's going to be massively lower. Again, I can entertain the idea that the entry-level model could have a 3-digit price. I can't entertain the idea that it'll be $200.
I don't think it'll be anywhere near that cheap. I think you're both right that it'll be around abouts of $1,000 if it's what we think it is, which, by the way, obviously it may be totally different. But if it's less than $1,000, I will be stunned.
I think also, I saw a few people make the comment that Apple has to respond Chromebook style because Chromebooks are apparently selling well to education. First of all, I think Apple's answer to the Chromebook is the iPad. I don't think it's a cheap laptop.
And by the way, iPads can push up into $1,000 if you buy like the fancy model. So it's not like iPads are $200 either.
Oh yeah, and certainly the education market's buying like the $300 and $400 models, but still, that's still more than a Chromebook, and in many ways harder to manage for a big school or fleet type use. But anyway, I don't think Apple holds the educational relationship as some kind of thing that they cannot ever lose. Education customers are, just like big enterprise customers, there's a lot of buyers out there that will buy that stuff, but they're extremely hard to get. And education, it's like enterprise, but with no money. Like there is money in education, but not nearly as much as anybody wants.
You can't fleece them like IBM will do for its corporate customers by charging them insane fees because they know it may look crazy, but they have so much money they'll pay it.
Right, and many of the biggest buyers are going to be very high needs, high maintenance customers that you're going to have to come to them on their terms and make concessions to them because they have to buy a couple hundred or thousand of these things and then maintain them over time and justify that to all these different committees and funders and work within the grants and everything. Like, there's so much complexity in that system, and it's so hard to get, and in the end there's not a whole lot of money to be made there, and so I don't think Apple looks at that as something that they must keep. I think education should be looked at just like any other big enterprise customer, where like they'll be happy to serve them, but only on Apple's terms, and they're not that scared to lose them. And you can look at it and say, well, you want to catch kids early, but I think the era of kids, of kids having their like primary computing experience at school is certainly not going away, and probably will never totally go away for many demographics and kids. But I think the relevance of that is being greatly reduced by personal devices, smartphones, iPod Touches, and iPads at home.
I was going to say, like, Apple doesn't necessarily have to be too concerned with keeping the education market. It just has to be concerned with keeping the kids. I think it's doing pretty well at keeping the kids because, like you said, the kids have contact with computing devices outside. Computing is everywhere now. It's not just in the school or work. It's a part of life, right? So as long as Apple keeps the kids, you're okay. Now there is a danger here because, like, if Chromebooks ever did become pervasive, which I don't think that Chromebooks are doing well, but I don't think it's like they're wiping Apple out of education. But if they do become pervasive, that's Microsoft hates it because all the kids are going to be doing all their work in Google Docs instead of Word. And Apple should hate it because kids will become acclimated to the Google ecosystem, which does not involve Apple. And the Google ecosystem in terms of their cloud stuff is actually pretty damn good. Google for your email, Google for your shared documents, like that's Google's thing. A bunch of web applications, lowest common denominator, works everywhere, all your crap synced. If kids get used to that, it's a short jump from there to a Google phone where all your stuff is, right? So, keeping the kids, part of keeping the kids is keeping a toehold in education. So far in sort of the Jobs 2 era, it seems like Apple's approach to education has been, if you are a prestige school, if there's going to be a news story about your school getting fancy stuff, we want to have our stuff in the prestige school. And the prestige school is not necessarily the rich kid's school, but it's the school that's story worthy. Is it a school that's up and coming, that's doing much better now? Is it a school that got a big grant? Is it a school, you want it to be a story. You want it to be like the important ones. And then it should be significant. The kids in that school and the teachers in that school should feel lucky to have Apple hardware because it's fancy and shiny, nice and expensive. And that's where Apple seems to be in education these days. It's not so much bending over backwards, with the possible exception of keeping the iPad 2 around for a long time, but they're not doing stuff like, remember they used to do the eMac and the various Macs that were made just for education.
Those were all pretty short-lived, though.
Well, but they would do that. They would say, we're going to make a model of Mac that is only for education, and it's going to make compromises that work for education. Usually those compromises were ways to make it cheaper. Sometimes it would be an education-only version. I think they still have that on.
Right, like the super cheap iMac and stuff.
Right, or keep around a model just for education. So they still are doing stuff for the market, but I think the days are gone where they design like the giant tooth, the big molar. You can look up what that is and put it in the show notes. A computer that only ever sold to education. Most of those were terrible, by the way, but they existed, and Apple's not doing that anymore. There's not a computer with a different name, like it's not an iMac, it's not a Mac Mini or whatever, a different name that you can't buy unless you're in education. So Apple is out of that business.
It's funny you mention education and Apple because right around the time we moved to Richmond, one of the surrounding counties, they were using iBooks and issuing, I believe, all middle schoolers and high schoolers iBooks. And they decided it was cheaper and better to go with Dell's, and they've been using Dell's ever since. And you may have heard of this.
Oh, I did.
This was the area in which we live. It made national news because they were selling these like 4-year-old iBooks for $50 at the NASCAR track in downtown Richmond. And there were actually like stampedes trying to beat each other up to get to the front of the line so you could buy a $50 4-year-old iBook. And that was right around where we live. And now they've been using Dells for years and they're pieces of crap. Although to be fair, these iBooks were falling apart by the time they were done with them.
Yeah, that's like it's like buying a used police car. Like there's a reason why used police cars usually just become the crappiest taxis for the crappiest taxi services in the world. Like it is like these devices are in such constant heavy use for those 4 years. Like you do not want them afterwards. Although to be fair to those $50 iBooks, can you imagine a stampede for 4-year-old PCs at any price?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, because it's not a fashion item. It doesn't have the prestige associated. Even an out of date technology thing still has the fashion cachet, so people are interested, and they feel like it's a steal at $50. You know, if you want to make the foreign listeners, the non-US listeners, feel even more that we live in a third world country, we can describe the other common phenomenon for technologies in schools. Technologies or, tissues and paper towels, which is there's no money in the budget for it at all. The only way your school is ever going to get any kind of technology or, paper towels or tissues for the kids to use is the parents themselves, through the Parent Teachers Association or some other organization thing, will raise money, and the parents will all pay for the computers for their kids' school. And that only works where all the parents are rich. So you can guess how many people's schools have Macs in them. It's only the schools that are in districts where, and even in the districts with rich people, even those districts can't pass laws to raise taxes enough to pay for anything for their schools, barely can keep the buildings up, barely can pay the teachers their meager salaries, can't afford any computers. If you want your classroom to have paper towels, napkins, or tissues, you also have to pay for those and do drives to put it around. This is in the rich neighborhoods. That's the state of education in our country.
That's absolutely true. When I went to high school, it was in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which at the time, as a county, was the single most affluent county in the entire country, because it had a whole bunch of silly rich superstars that instead of living in New York, they'd live in Fairfield County. Now, the particular town I lived in was, I guess, reasonably affluent, but nothing remarkable. And every spring, without fail, come about March or so, all of our Xerox paper, our copy machine paper, it was perforated about 2/3 of the way down and then again in half. And at the bottom, it said Danbury Hospital Radiology Department. Because despite the fact that we lived in the most affluent county in the entire country, all of the people that lived in the particular town we lived in didn't want to pay enough money to the schools so that we had copy paper for the entire year. And we needed to accept donations of crappy leftover perforated copy paper from the local hospital.
Oh my God. That's so sad.
Oh, goodness. All right. What other follow-up do we have? One last note. This is from Oliver Agar. Apologies, Oliver. He had tweeted at the three of us, it's pretty clear now that both Thunderbolt and Lightning are going to be the shortest lived ports ever. I don't know if I agree with that. It's certainly possible, but I don't see Lightning going away anytime soon. I think Thunderbolt is more likely to go away, but I'm still skeptical that that's going to be the case. What do you guys think?
I think Thunderbolt's going to last just as long as FireWire did, just because it'll be sticking out the back of that Mac Pro until Apple stops making that computer.
Oh, definitely.
It doesn't mean it's going to Thunderbolt, sure, totally go away from the MacBook Air if they want, because it can go away from the MacBook Air because the innovation of Thunderbolt, that was a simplification. Hey, display, Ethernet, USB, all over one port. But if USB 3 can do all that too, then right, Thunderbolt port gone, at the very least from the small laptops, probably also from the big ones, because it's only for basically high speed storage. It's kind of an aberration that Thunderbolt ended up being on sort of the low end laptops, because it was we're not so much into the high speed storage part. We like the idea that there's one connector that you can carry all the sorts of stuff over. You can carry the display over it. You could do an Ethernet adapter. It was kind of a shame that, you could do each one of those things, but you had to swap your stupid adapters and crap like that. But you could plug it into the Thunderbolt display and get a full complement of ports through one connector. I see no reason that USB 3 can't usurp that. And so then the only reason left to have Thunderbolt is, all right, well, actually, it's a super high-speed thing. And, of course, the Mac Pro has 1 million Thunderbolt ports on it. We'll continue to have them. The Thunderbolt spec will continue to get revised. I think there'll still be Thunderbolt ports all over those things. So I don't think Thunderbolt is going away. And Lightning, I definitely don't think is going away, because Lightning is still smaller and, more importantly, thinner, and I would imagine potentially more durable than USB 3. I don't think Apple's going to go through its entire iOS line and say, oh, USB 3 Type-C is here. We can get rid of the silly Lightning thing and change it. Nope. Lightning's going to be with us for a long time, at least as long as I think the 30-pin connector was with us.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't see, Thunderbolt, I think, is just like FireWire 800, where it's going to be on the highest end Pro products, and that's about it. It does have that advantage, as you said, of because it is really just PCI Express over a cable, you can offer direct full speed, bus connected versions of the other ports without a big performance penalty or translation penalty or anything like that. But all those other ports it's offering are getting less relevant over time and less necessary over time. So like I think the biggest justification for Thunderbolt in 2 years is not even going to be those like PCI card case boxes that you can like, use an old PCI video processing card in or anything. Like, I don't think that's it at all. I think Thunderbolt in 2 years is going to be looked at only as the highest speed port for external SSD arrays and disk arrays. Like, that's what it's mainly for. And I think that's probably mostly what it's used for today even. But I think that's going to be like its mainstay. And everything else is going to go to wireless or USB 3.
And Thunderbolt will have to keep scaling up because, like, I always imagine the Mac Pros with these Thunderbolt things having something to do with like video stuff. And it's like 4K video eventually becomes more common. Like, you just cranked up your bandwidth requirements again. So like, if these giant arrays of super fast storage, and the only way you can let that storage run at the full speed that it's capable of running at and get the data into your computer is either to have it inside your computer, which Apple doesn't make any of those anymore, or it's got to be over the fastest possible external bus. And right now, that is, even with USB 3, Thunderbolt is still faster, and I imagine they'll just keep making it faster and faster, and it'll become more and more confined to the people who have insane data rates that are necessary to do, like, uncompressed 5K video for Hollywood movies, or God knows what they're doing with these Mac Pros these days. So,
right. And those enclosures cost more than a MacBook Pro.
Yeah. It's not the realm of regular people. Now, I'm trying to think: is there any reason for Thunderbolt to remain on like the 15-inch MacBook Pro or anything?
Well, it is the highest end laptop in the lineup, and there's always going to be demand from people who try to do pro work on laptops, on the go or on site or whatever, or on set or whatever. So like, there's always going to be demand. Whether they choose to address that demand is not a guaranteed thing. They might choose at some point, you know what, we're done with that. Like, just like how many things died with the 17-inch MacBook Pro. I think the 15-inch MacBook Pro is definitely, or the 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro, I think is going to be the last Apple laptop with Thunderbolt. But I don't know how soon it's going to come. If I had to guess, I would say maybe 2 more years before it's relegated to only a handful of models in the lineup.
I hope that they keep it around for at least a couple more years, because I know we just finally got done with the transition at work where every conference room has a mini DisplayPort, aka Thunderbolt to VGA connector, so that every Mac that comes into the room can hook up to the cruddy projector that's in the room. And it used to be that first everyone who had a Mac had one of the adapters, and they'd write their names on them in a marker, but then they'd lose them, and then you'd leave one in the conference room, and now they're like chained to the conference room. So every conference room has one. And if Apple drops Thunderbolt from their entire line, it'll be like, well, every conference room has an adapter that has no place to be plugged into any of the new Macs. And that will be sad, because it seems like we haven't had enough time where anyone with a Mac can go into any conference room and plug into the projector. Then I feel like we need to have a couple more years before we have to redo all the adapters again.
Yeah, because they could put it over USB 3 in DisplayPort mode, the alternate mode, which we talked about a few minutes ago. And yeah, it's just another $30 adapter at the Apple Store.
Right.
Just this big daisy chain of that going into a mini Thunderbolt to the HDMI or to DVI to VGA. You'll have like this 5 adapter long chain.
Sometimes it's VGA, sometimes it's HDMI. That's not the problem. It's the end that connects into the Mac that's the problem. So it would be nice to have some stability in that for a little while longer, because that's the other thing Thunderbolt does. It's like, well, Thunderbolt, I don't need high-speed stuff. I don't care that I multiplex multiple things over it. Then if you don't care about any of those things and you look at the Thunderbolt port, it's like, oh, that's just my external display port. Like, I imagine most of the people in my company who have Macs consider that their display port. Like, this is where I hook up external monitors, not knowing all the other things that one port can do.
Right. And Apple's answer might be, like, for a big part of the line, it might just be, well, use AirPlay and have an Apple TV, which of course is comical. But
yeah, there's lots of AirPlay-enabled projectors.
Right, exactly. Anyway, our final sponsor this week is Fracture. They're back once again. Fracture prints photos in vivid color directly onto glass. Go to fractureme.com to see more. So I have Fracture pictures hanging all over my office. We've heard from many people who have gotten them too. They're great. My idea, which I spread whenever I have one of these ad reads, is I print my app icons onto the small 5x5 size, which is $15. I print my app icons on those whenever I make a new app, and so I have this row of like app icon trophy pictures across this part of the wall in my office, and it's really nice. People compliment them. It's very nice. like to as a physical physical representation of things you've done in the software world where you don't usually get physical representations. It's just really nice. Their print quality is really great. The way it works, so they print the photo directly onto glass, and it's onto the back of glass so that you see the front. And it's a thin layer of glass mounted to a thin piece of like a foam board kind of thing, so you can hang it easily. And so they're actually pretty lightweight. It's not like hanging this giant pane of glass on your wall that you're afraid is going to like tear the wall anchor out of the wall and fall out and shatter. No, they're pretty lightweight for their size, and they just look fantastic because it just looks like a piece of glass. That's it. Like there's no frame around it. Like it is its own frame. It doesn't need another frame around it, which is a huge cost savings and a huge hassle savings. It's just really nice. The print quality is great. The prices are very reasonable. Once again, it starts at just $15 for the 5x5 square print, which I use for my app icons. It's also great for Instagram prints. And then I have a couple of, 12 by 17, something like that in that size. I have a couple of those above my monitor too. They're great quality, very reasonable prices. About half of these I've actually bought at full price without coupon codes, and because it was just that good and I wanted them right then, and that was it. Anyway, check it out. It is the thinnest, lightest, and most elegant way to display your favorite photos. Great gift idea too. If you missed any holiday gifts, you got to send one kind of late. This is a great gift idea. I can't say enough good things about my Fracture prints. Anyway, get 15% off your first order by using coupon code ATP15. Once again, that's 15% off your first order with coupon code ATP15. Go to fractureme.com to see more. Thanks a lot to Fracture for sponsoring our show once again.
Yeah, I actually have I think 4 of them on their way. I copied your idea, but instead of apps, I did it with the shows that I've been on, that I've been on regularly. And then I got that picture of Aaron and Declan from the hospital that I really like printed. And so they're on their way, and I'm very excited about it. So definitely check them out.
No feed icons?
No feed icons.
Too soon?
I actually, the funny thing is, as you were doing that read, it occurred to me, I don't know why I didn't put that in that order, put fast text in that order. Like that probably speaks poorly to what I think about fast text these days.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I know that is sad. Actually, I'm a little upset with myself, but anyway.
Well, use code ATP15 to go order one now.
Yeah, exactly. So let's be done with follow-up, and let's try to answer the question, what can Apple do to fix the reliability? What did you call it, Marco? Nosedive?
Oh, God. We're still talking about this. Can we please stop talking about this?
We talked about the issue last time, but we didn't get to, like, okay, so we agree that this is an issue. We may disagree about whether things are worse now than they've ever been or have been in the past X number of years, whatever value you want to pay for X is. But I think we all agreed that regardless of the history and whether the trend and what the direction of the trend is, the current state of things is not satisfactory for the products and customers that Apple currently has. That the customers are dissatisfied. They have a lot of products. They all interoperate with each other. Marco's like multiplying factor of like your problem multiplied the probability of problem here multiplied by the probability of problem there. The probability that you have a problem somewhere just goes up. It's not just additive because of the way they all interact.
By the way, I'm not clear on that math. It might actually be exponential or factorial. Yeah, I'm not 100% confident on that math. Go ahead.
It's not additive.
Right, yeah. It's not a linear additive progression. It is some kind of curve.
Yeah, you can do the probability things of just like if you have one thing and you have a certain probability, it's up 50% of the time, you have 50% reliability, right? Or you have 2 things, they're both up 50% of the time. Now you need them both to be up, and you can figure it out with marbles and jars and all that other stuff, and it's not. Anyway, it's worse. But so we all agree that they have a reliability problem. They need to address it. And we talked all last show about arguing about whether this is a new problem, an old problem, or whatever. But so the question is, how does Apple improve its reliability? If you say, how does it fix its problem? It sounds like there's something, and then someday there's going to be a fix to it. I think a better way to phrase it is, how does Apple improve the reliability of its products, specifically the software reliability? Because the hardware does have issues, but whenever hardware has an issue, you always wonder if it's like a driver issue, or, sometimes it's actually a hardware issue where something's overheating or some solder joints are bad, or, something like. But then sometimes, I think the vast majority of the time, it's like a driver issue, or they just never quite get it working right over. So what can Apple do to improve the reliability of its products?
We talked a little about this last whatever episode it was, in that they could either space out the releases between OSs, which I think we all pretty much agree is never going to happen, or just bite off less each time.
I don't agree that it's never going to happen, because I could totally see them taking longer between iOS releases or any OS releases. Not significantly longer, not like 2 years, but I could see the Mac going to 18 months and the iOS going to like 14 or 15 and slowly drifting through the year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but they've set such a precedent, and which they've broken precedents in the past, but they've set such a precedent of having a new version of iOS every fall. And there was a time not long ago when I think people, both nerds and non-nerds, got really excited about that every fall. Now, to be fair, they may not be so excited, and we may not be so excited about that anymore. And so maybe now is the time to break that precedent. But I'm very skeptical they would do it on iOS, and I'm fairly skeptical they would go less frequently than every year on OS 10. But that's certainly one answer, or just biting off less each time, doing less new things and keeping yourself at a year release. I mean, that's another option.
Well, so the obvious option that's sitting in the notes is, and the one that's been suggested by many people, and that I believe we talked about in the past many times, is to go to what originally Intel dubbed the TikTok cadence, and which Apple has more or less de facto dubbed the blank S cadence. You get the 4, the 4S, the 5, the 5S, and then who knows what they're going to do with the 6. But the idea is you have you do a release that's your big release with all your fancy crap in it, and then the next one is pretty much the same as the previous one, just modified in some way. So after the 4, you have the 4S, the same hardware design. You tweak it, you move the antennas around, but like it's not an entire redesign. And in OS 10, Apple did the same thing with Leopard. That was their big release, and then Snow Leopard is like, well, it's like Leopard, but we just improved crap. And then they had Lion, which was a big release, and then they had Mountain Lion, which was supposed to be it's like Lion, but we just improved some stuff. They're off of that train in OS 10 because Mavericks and Yosemite are not related to each other in that way. I mean, Yosemite's radically different than Mavericks was. You could just say Mavericks was an in-between release, and then after Yosemite, they'll have one that's like Yosemite but tweaked. But it's very difficult to tell because the names made it clear with Leopard, Snow Leopard, Lion, Mountain Lion. But then you could argue, like, well, did the contents of those releases reflect the naming? Only with Snow Leopard did Apple come out and say, this is like the no new features release. All we're doing is refining stuff. And even that was a lie because they added tons of internal crap. And so...
Right. It was a huge under the hood change, just like it didn't look different to users.
Right. And like the big thing is if you don't add user-facing features, even if you make tons of under the hood changes, you can lie to people and say no new features by basically saying no new user-facing features. And if there's no new user-facing features, your expectation is that all they did was improve the functionality of the existing user feature. Like people weren't distracted by saying, never mind about making whatever work, make this new thing, right? Or work better or whatever. That is mostly, I think, a perception issue, but I think trying to achieve that perception from the customer base influences the way the engineering organization operates. Like in the same way that if you're trying to impress people with GWiz features, it influences how you assess like risk, reliability, or whatever. If you said straight out that like, oh, this is going to be a no new feature release, that gives the engineering organization the freedom to make different trade-offs internally because there's no pressure to make the whizzy new feature that's going to be impressive in a demo because you've already said like the public message was no new features, so you don't have to do that. And then you can when you make decisions about what are we going to refactor, what are we going to rip out, what giant new internal frameworks like GCD we're going to add, you can make all those decisions without the pressure of having to serve the external need to be impressive. So the phone, it's kind of weird that the phone hardware has been on that cadence for so long, but the phone software has definitely not been on that cadence, right?
Well, and I would argue the hardware, that's kind of a red herring. Like, if you look at the 3S releases of iPhones we've had so far, the 3GS, the 4S, and the 5S, those were all major hardware releases. The like S, like, you know, minor revision designation is really only cosmetic in all three of those cases.
But it's not cosmetic because like it is cosmetic, but it's like the cosmetics are a huge part of the hardware design because it's manufacturing lines, it's the tooling, it's the materials, it's it's all that part of it is a huge part of the product. We think the product is like the tech specs of the CPU or whatever, and you're right. They made S things that's like the entire guts of this phone are different. How is this like a minor revision? There's like no shared part with the previous one, but that's just the guts, right? the big part of these phones is how do you make a million little glass aluminum rectangle thingies to the quality control that Apple wants, and they put a huge investment into making the production lines and the tools and everything that the materials and the expertise to assemble these phones, and they want to get their bang for their buck out of that. So they say we're going to make 2 years worth of phones that use the same materials, assembled in more or less the same way, with only possibly minor external changes to, like again, moving the antennas and the breakpoints of the whatever, construction techniques, like whatever they're using or whatever. They want to get 2 years of value out of that.
CPU architecture.
Yeah, but that, like the silicon, I think is easier because that's like, look, silicon revs when it revs, right? But that is a separate thing. But I'm saying the physical part of it is such a big part of, physical products that's where they want to get the thing. And like the fabs, like they don't have to make a new fab, and except when they do die shrinks and stuff. But it's like once you have the fab up and running, if you give it a different design, then it just is a different design, right? And if someone gets a new fab, like it's not so much part of like the production line for a particular phone. I think is more built for that phone than a production line for a particular CPU is built for that CPU. Yeah,
but where they're having problems is not, my 5S, the parts don't fit right together. Where they're having problems is in the software and the low level component interactions and the services and stuff that like.
But do you think that's hardware related? Like even the 64-bit transition, like I know there was problems with like going from 32 to 64, and the 64-bit versions were buggy and stuff like that. But I have to imagine, like, you have to pay that transition sometime. They wanted to be the first out of the gate. I think they've reaped benefits of being the first. But other than that, I don't think any other silicon-based transition has been particularly killer to them.
No, I'm just saying that that the idea that the iPhone hardware is on this tick-tock cadence, I would say is mostly wrong. That it is on that tick-tock cadence in only the physical shell way, but the parts inside seem to change just as rapidly with every version of the iPhone, regardless of what letters after its name.
Yeah, no, I agree on that, but I think the physical shell part is a huge percentage of the hardware product. And so that's why I don't think you can dismiss it as just cosmetics or just the visual thing, because when you think about the physical hardware product, it's almost as if the silicon part is might as well be a separate thing. You have a certain allotted amount of space that you have to fit in, but really the product designers of the iPhone are designing a physical thing. And by the way, this little silicon sliver goes in whatever's left over when we put the battery in. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it's not done that way or whatever. But if you look at the parts inside there, the phone is all everything else, and then this little tiny thing that's the actual phone. So I just see that. I just see that as a separate cadence, and that cadence has not so much been on the because I think they just change everything every year. They go from year to year. They change who's going to sell us our radio chip this year. Forget about the stuff who's going to sell the display controller this year or the battery controller. From year to year, it's just whoever has the best chips with the best specs, or if Apple needs to do custom designs itself, it just changes all the time on the phones, and that hasn't been a particular source of problems. I think if it is, we don't have enough insight to know this one phone had problems because of some flaky chip and you didn't know about it, but next year Apple picked a different manufacturer and ironed out those problems, or OS 10 or iOS was working around this problem with this buggy chipset and you didn't know it, but it took a lot of engineering effort from Apple. But for OS 10, Apple, the Mac lines change much more slowly in a much more predictable way. With we kind of know what's going into them with the Intel chipsets. We know what's available for them to go into, and I think for the OS 10 cadence, Apple is just again, chasing itself, chasing its own tail or as someone said, when I was asking who they're chasing, so they were chasing iOS. It's well, that's just chasing yourself, because they are iOS as well. They can make the decision of how to move along with the two things in cadence to each other. But I think that type of cadence formalized, and the reason you have to formalize it is perception, PR. If you formalize it, like Intel did. Intel formalized it too, because they recognized that if you just do this internally, kind of sort of secretly, then the marketing PR organization still has to come up with some reason why everything is awesome every single year. Whereas if you announce this is our new strategy for the foreseeable future, then only every other year do you have to impress, and everyone just gets used to, this is the year where they just make stuff work better. And that becomes a story in itself, and people like that. Customers like it, and you don't get the bad stories about, it was WWDC, but Apple didn't have any new features. You just know this is a talk year or whatever. I forget which one is the friggin' ticker, the talk.
Yeah, I always forget that every time.
You know what I mean? So
It's like it's the opposite of what you think. Like the tick, I think the tick is the minor one.
yeah, and the talk is like the loud one because it's
I don't know.
Doesn't make sense. But anyway, a tick-tock cadence, Apple has considered and sort of played around with in the past and continues to play around with, arguably, on the non-silicon part of the hardware side. I think that has the best sort of, the best features of any solution I can think of, other than the silly solution people will say, just be more careful and do stuff better. Like, that's not a solution, right? Because of the external effects of this, because it is a thing that you announce to the world, and that announcement frees up things inside your organization to act in a way that they wouldn't be able to if you tried to do it only as an internal change.
I read something earlier today that I thought was really fascinating for a bunch of reasons, but it's relevant here. On Objective CIO, they had an interview with Andy Matuszak. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. Anyway, he used to work on UIKit, if memory serves, and they had an interview with him, and the question that they asked was, what effect do you think Swift will have on Apple's framework APIs? Do you expect something here in the short term? And his answer was very interesting and relevant. I don't actually have insider knowledge here, so this is just speculation, but I think it will be a long process. At least when I was there, the team spent the majority of their time not maintaining and improving frameworks, but really supporting market features like new screen sizes or support for new hardware. That's what takes most of the time. So it will take a conscious decision to do anything non-trivial, and I don't see that forthcoming.
Yeah, that actually mirrors what we heard when somebody who works on iWork wrote into us a couple of maybe a month or two ago now, who wrote in because we were talking about how we were complaining about iWork and how like there seems to be nobody working on it for years, and all of a sudden it gets rushed together. And this person who wrote in basically said that's not the case. That instead the team is constantly working on it, but that iWork always has to show off the latest and greatest OS features and directions of the company's sharing and cloud platforms and everything. And so they're constantly having to keep up with the new marketing features and the new directions of things like iCloud instead of working on the core product functionality. So it's actually it sounds like this is possibly infecting many parts of Apple, and this is like their market features are moving so quickly and are so aggressive that the rest of the engineering department is maybe not able to keep up with things like quality and long-term feature maintenance. You think that's fair based on what we've heard so far?
Certainly sounds right to me.
One thing that gives me hope here, I mentioned this on the talk shows, I'll be quick, but the watch is going to be where Apple focuses most of their PR for the next little while. And we'll see how it goes, how long that lasts. Maybe the watch is going to be the primary focus of Apple's marketing for the next year or two or three. I don't know. But I think that might help take some of the marketing burden off of the other products. And so maybe by focusing so much on the watch and first watch kit stuff, and then later on the native SDK, and then the second generation of the watch hardware, maybe that will be such the focus of the marketing that just like the Mac was kind of playing second fiddle when the iPhone came out, maybe the watch will then make the iPhone and iPad and the Mac now, it'll give them like a break for a little while from being in the spotlight and give them a chance to stabilize.
Yeah, the whole idea of like having to support new hardware factors or new APIs. New APIs you have a little bit more control over because you can just lay off on that. But new hardware features, that kind of gets back to what kind of company Apple is. They're trying to make entire products that have hardware and software integrated and trying to improve both aspects of that. And it seems like, hardware is like, oh, I want to make a nicer phone, a cooler laptop, like I want to make a better product or whatever. And that thing I was just talking about, like, changing the chipsets you use for your radios or the manufacturers for your power controller, your display controller inside the phone, just changing that all the time because you want to get the one that has the best features, the lowest power, the best contract deal for parts, and all these other things that change year over year. I can imagine lots of time being spent supporting that. It's like, can't you guys just pick one manufacturer for like the, whatever IO controller for iOS devices and keep it for 1 or 2 years in a row so that we can do something else, or display controller, like that would make their lives easier, but it would mean well, but the new one is slightly lower power and it has this extra little feature, and we can combine these two things into one chip. And it's like, if we don't do that, if we try to make it easier for the software guys by trying to make a more stable platform, kind of like the Intel, Intel-based motherboards and chipsets are, or whatever, like a little bit more stable, then the other guys will have a better phone than us. And every year we have to be better battery life, better everything. Like, I think the screen size changes. That is a big hassle for them to do, but part of that is like they're paying the price for their expedience in doing the original version of iOS. It's like, let's just get it working on this one phone. Like, they didn't do what Android did, which was forced to do, which is let's try at least to make a generic framework for doing UI on variable screen sizes. And the Apple one was like, we're at the edge of what is even possible. Just make it work on the original iPhone. That is the mandate, no matter what you have to do. And so they've paid the price in, like, they reap the benefits being the first person out with the iPhone that no one else could even think was possible. And then the price is the engineering compromises you had to do to get there, meaning you have a long road ahead of you to be able to support arbitrary resolutions, arbitrary screen sizes. And so how many years has it taken to get to where we are now with like multiple screen sizes and auto layout and all the scaling and the high res screens? Like, it was very much unlike OS X, where in the beginning of OS X, they had this model of what the future of the display system is going to be like. And the hardware wasn't there to support it. And it was terrible. And they're just like, we just got to hold on for like 6 more years and this crap will work right. And even then they had to, do some fairly large architectural changes to get stuff off the CPU and onto the GPU. So there's, everything in engineering, software, hardware engineering is a trade-off. And I just think what we see now, and this whole idea of the UI kept people spending their time like treading water and doing marketing features, is the result of engineering trade-offs made many, many years earlier, just kind of coming home to roost now.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Squarespace, Igloo, and Fracture, and we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
100 episodes in the bag. God, we're getting old. So how about the Detroit Auto Show?
Did anything happen to the Detroit Auto Show other than the Ford GT?
The NSX.
Yeah, but everyone knew about that. Everyone saw pictures. Like, what was new that we learned about the NSX? I haven't looked at any of the news, so I'm asking you. What was new that we learned about the NSX at the Detroit Auto Show?
We learned it's a twin turbo V6. We learned it.
You didn't know? We didn't know that already?
I don't keep up with Honda because I don't drive a Honda, but I didn't know that. I didn't know for sure it would be mid-engined, although it's a safe assumption, and it is mid-engined.
What do you mean you didn't know it would be mid-engined? We've seen final pictures of the NSX for like what seems like a year now. You can just look at the car. Where do you think they're putting the engine?
Really? We've seen it?
Yeah, no, yeah. I like more or less the complete NSX, like maybe with like camouflage or whatever, but like we've known what this car is going to look like for a long time.
No, fair enough. Well, I guess I just don't follow Honda as closely as you do, John.
I don't follow it at all, but I've, when it was like a year ago and they said, this is the new NSX, and they were showing like drawings, and then you get to see the one with the camouflage paint all over it. And I guess now this is the first time we're seeing the one like, painted and presented the way Honda wants to do that. But anyway, I think it's kind of ugly.
You know what I did like is on their intro video, which to my eye looked 100% CGI. I mean, it was good CGI, but it looked like, to me anyway, it looked like it was completely CGI. On the bottom of this CGI video of the NSX driving around, it said professional driver close course. And it was a completely fabricated video. Or if it wasn't, it was very poorly recorded because it looked at
Yeah, I watched the video. It didn't look CG. Is that the one with the little kid playing with the toy old NSX?
Yeah.
That looked like it could be real to me. I mean, maybe modified after the fact, but
I don't know. I just thought that was funny. The new Ford GT looks good.
yeah, I'm not that excited about the NSX. The GT makes me uncomfortable because I don't like the idea of styling driven nostalgia or nostalgia driven styling to the degree that has been practiced by US automakers over the past, like, say, decade or two, where they make make the new Mustang and make it look like a modernized version of a particular model of old Mustang.
Right, which usually makes it look worse.
Oh, see, I think they all look good.
Yeah, you live in the South.
But I agree with you that this whole idea is getting pretty played now.
Right, because it's okay to be inspired by cars of the past, but you have to know what the difference between inspired is and like a style parody. Where or not even like a style parody, like you're taking the Ford GT is a great example. Like the previous Ford GT, the GT40 thing, right? That it's like the same freaking car as the old one. It's just puffed up into modern. Like they're taking the same design. It's not inspired by it. It's the same design. And this new one is more different, but still, I mean, I don't know if we have enough car listeners. I know someone right now is writing an angry email that mentions the word 911 in it, right? And we understand 911, it's like, or the Volkswagen Beetle for that matter. But I feel like the 911 has come by that honestly, by never moving away from that.
The 911 is a Volkswagen Beetle.
Ooh.
But you know what I mean? Like it has not. Every year they just change it a little bit. And yeah, they all look the same, and it's all kind of the same family resemblance. But it's not like the difference between the 911 and the Beetle is great, because the Beetle was the Beetle, and then there was a large gap of time. Then they made the new Beetle, which was exactly the same. It's like, let's make a modern version of the old Beetle, right? And then they have the new revision of that or whatever, right? The 911, every single revision was just like a little change. It just never drifted too far, right? I feel like that is more honest than waiting for a huge gap of time and then making a new car that looks like an old car. I don't like new cars that are modern versions of old cars all the way down to it, that aren't even a mix of this grille is reminiscent of the grille on the blah, 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 and this tail is reminiscent of this, and this is new. Like, that is more appropriate. Don't just make me a new version of the old one. But I have to say the new GT moves farther away from the old ones. You can still kind of see the GT40 and all the predecessors under there, but
I think what's the pillar right behind the door? The B pillar, is that right?
Yes.
From the B pillar to the front, it looks almost identical, but from the B pillar to the back, it looks totally different.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's a nice looking car. All versions, the original one, the GT40 from like a decade ago or whatever, and the new crazy looking one. These are all fairly...
No. You've got that backwards. It's the GT from a decade ago and the GT40 from the 60s or 70s or whatever it was.
You think these are good looking cars?
Well, I thought when they did the revision one, it was called the G. I don't remember the name.
So the one that Clarkson had, that was from like the early 2000s.
That was just called the GT as well?
That's just the Ford GT. The original one that started it all in the 60s or 70s, whenever it was, that was the GT40. I'm pretty sure about this.
These are hideous. I think this is hideous. I think the NSX is hideous.
The new NSX or the old one?
The new one. The old one looks, I think, very nice, and I think the design of the old one actually ages fairly well for a car that was designed as long ago as it was. I'm not excited. I mean, I was never a huge NSX person. I never got that into high-end cars back then, so I don't really have any nostalgia either way. But to me, the GT is at least continuing what it has been more recently. The NSX is this car was gone for a long time, and now we're bringing it back. But to me, this is kind of like bringing it back to tech for a second. Please get me out of this terrible car conversation, because these cars are cars I don't care about. But it's kind of like the new Star Wars movie. Where I am not excited about the new Star Wars movie because inherently because it is Star Wars.
Wait, can I make some popcorn?
You're not excited about the old Star Wars movies either, so
no, I like them. I mean, I was never that obsessed with them, but I like them. But to me, calling this an NSX and calling the new Star Wars movie Star Wars is really just it's like licensing the name. It's a branding thing. It is not, because it's totally different people working on it.
What are you talking about? Yes, of course, but the people who work on the new Mustang have nothing to do with the people who work on the old Mustang. You still use the Mustang name. It's a franchise, but every Mustang doesn't have to look like a particular past model. There wasn't.
No, I'm not talking about appearance. I'm talking more about like spirit and continuity. So like making a new Star Wars movie today versus making a new Star Wars movie in 50 years when everyone who made the first one is dead. Is it any different, really? Like, you're just taking the name.
Everyone who made the NSX is not dead.
I know, but it's been gone for long enough, and the market has moved on in so many ways. And I'm sure the people at Honda have changed staff a little bit since then. Like, I think we're talking about brand names the way that companies want you to talk about brand names as if they have some kind of like a major significance with what the product will actually be like. And the fact is, it's just a nameplate on this. It's just a nameplate on Star Wars. It doesn't matter.
That's how cars have always worked. Ignore movies for a second. That's how cars have always worked. There is no relation between the 911 today and the 9. Yes, you just keep calling it the 911. You keep calling it the Mustang. Keep calling it the Camaro. You keep calling it the Corvette. That's how car labels work. This is not an aberration.
Right. The M5 is an abomination compared to the M1 that originally started the whole M moniker.
Or even just M5 compared to M5s. Compare this M5 to 3 generations ago. What do they share? Just the M5. It's just a way to that's how car naming works. So I don't begrudge it that at all. What I complain about is when you make, for the styling specifically, when you pick a particular old car and you say make a modern version of that, where you don't even mix elements of other cars, but it's just like a complete facsimile. And the Mustang is, and I think they've done a little bit with the new Dodge Charger. Like, I don't like that. It's like saying we can't figure out we made a good looking car once in the 60s or 70s. We can't figure out how to make a good looking car again. So just make us a modern version of that car that we made that was good looking.
I mean, normally I totally agree with you that is what it is. And normally I would say in this conversation, wow, look at how ugly the American car is. But honestly, I cannot imagine what Acura has been thinking with their styling over the last decade or so either. Like, to me, these are both hideous cars.
Yeah, Acura has lost its way with the styling. I'm kind of disappointed that there aren't more cues from the old NSX in the new one. Like, I don't even think you need to make a modernized version, but just take some cues. Like the same way that the kidneys are a cue. Like, you can do so much with the kidneys in BMW. You don't say because a car has kidneys, it looks exactly like, a BMW from the 2 decades ago or something. But like, just styling elements. There should be some commonality in styling elements. I think, for example, the modern Cadillac takes that too far, where the cars don't look like each other exactly, but the styling elements are so dominant and they're so repeated everywhere that there's a sameness to them that's boring.
Although that CTS-V, what is it, 600 and change horsepower?
Speaking of ugly cars.
Oh, they've always been ugly.
Well, you've got the ATS if you don't want the fat one, but they look too similar.
Have you guys seen the new Lexus M3?
No.
Oh, it's rough.
Well, Lexus has been rough.
I know, but Lexus's styling was always very comfortable if you wanted to drive like an upscale Marshmallow for old people. And that's a perfectly valid market, and they've done very well there, and that's well deserved. But they, with their new like Sport F line or whatever it is, like they're trying to get in on the BMW territory of like the sport sedans, and oh my God, they're hideous in person. I hope you get a chance to see one sometime soon. Oh my goodness, they are rough. It's so bad.
What model of car are you talking about? I don't even recognize that. Lexus M3?
Well, no, it's Lexus's answer to the M3. So I think it's the ISF. It's it's like the F Sport version.
Yeah, the RCF. You're talking about the RCF, that big giant fat car?
No, it's a sedan. It might be the ISF.
No, it's the RCF. Do a Google for it.
Yes, you're right. It's the RCF now. It used to be the ISF.
Oh, okay.
It's fat because it's heavy, not because. Yeah, all the reviews I've read of it is just like too much weight, can't get out of its own way. Like it's like a really bad iteration of the GTR.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Yep, I'm seeing it. And also, I believe, am I wrong? I think they also have added like F Sport trim levels to a lot of the other models.
They have, and
that doesn't sound like anything I'm familiar with.
Exactly. It's the same thing. I mean, it's the same BS that BMW pulls.
I think it's every luxury car maker should have this thing. They should, whether it's the AMG model or like in Mercedes, you needed to have two. So it had the AMG model, but also the black. So right. Multiple layers of things. And
M Sport and M.
Yeah, and BMW had to have the M, and this, we can apply that M everywhere. We got the M Sport, and so Lexus and same thing with Infiniti and these other companies have taken too long to figure out what they're going to do, and I think Lexus is finally settling on the F. Audi has the RS and the S model, and then the RS model. So you do need these levels. This is like the the thing that luxury car makers do these days. And I'm glad Lexus has found one. I'm sad that whenever they add F to their models, it makes them uglier and crappier.
Did you also see that BMW had a pretty big presence at CES, actually?
Yeah, that was interesting. They're showing off, like, not only their, like, like their version of CarPlay, like all sorts of, but also like their gesture interface, their backseat Samsung tablets, and all sorts of weird stuff. What annoyed me most about what they showed off there is that almost none of it is anything I would actually want, and much of it I think was a step backwards. Like the big, like the key fob with the screen on it, the touch screen. Like, knowing BMW, thank God that will always be like $1,000 option, because I'm never buying that option, because like the last thing you want is your key fob to get bigger. And they're already so big, like they're already so chunky in your pocket. I mean,
and you don't want to have to look at it either. Like, why would you want to look at it? You want to be able to do it in your pocket. Just, like if there's anything you need to do with it at all. If it's a proximity key, there shouldn't be anything. But what if you want to open the trunk? So you should be able to reach in and press the little thing that opens the trunk. You shouldn't have to look at the screen.
And why would you want your key fob to have another battery draining feature on it? That's a terrible idea. Like, it's just so many bad ideas about that.
Well, you'll be able to get a new battery for you get the battery replaced at the dealer for $700, so it'll be fine.
Right.
That's true. John, what was the name of the memory stick for the Dreamcast that had a little display on it?
VMU, Visual Memory Unit.
Yeah. That's what it reminds me of.
I think it might have a color screen, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. The VMU had like one of those god-awful, like, original Game Boy style screens, but...
And unfortunately, the BMW is probably going to sell a lot more of them.
Yep, that's also true. But, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting seeing that BMW took CES so seriously. I still don't totally understand. Well, I shouldn't even say totally. I still don't understand the laser headlights. I've read that they're more directional, so they can leave a gap for like people in other cars on the road.
They're lasers, Casey. What more do you need to know?
Yeah, I mean, LEDs aren't cool enough anymore. Like,
are you kidding? Once marketing people even find out that it's possible to use lasers for lights, like, do that. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if they're worse in every possible way. Laser lights.
That's true. But I did see also that they have OLED tail lamps now, or they're trying them, which I thought was very peculiar. Like, I'm not really sure why one would want that, but I'm sure there's a good reason I'm not thinking of.
You can make them thinner for more light output, maybe, and obviously they're a little bit lower power, but I don't think it's a big deal for brake lights. But
yep, I don't know.
I'm looking at the NSX here. It's not too terrible. Like, that has the schnoz problem that Acura's have had, but
the cheese grater nose, and
it's a beak. It's not a cheese grater, but like from that's only like head on, right? And I think a lot of cars have a little bit of a nose problem lately too, but it's fairly restrained. Like, the headlights aren't bad. The little scoops on the side are okay. The back is ugly.
You think this is restrained?
Yeah, well, compared to the new Ford GT, that looks like it's ridiculous. Or even just the Corvette.
But compared to good taste, none of these are good examples, including the new Corvette, by the way.
Yeah, no, the Ferrari looks like a car from Knight Rider. It's supposed to look like it. Yes, I know Knight Rider was not a Corvette.
The new Corvette is probably, of all the cars you mentioned so far, I think the new Corvette is by far the best looking one.
The back of the Corvette is worse than the back of all these cars.
That's probably true.
Yeah, if you've seen one in the parking lot, it's just terrible. It's like the unibrow of it's like a big, just ugly. Yeah, the NSX it's fine. It's fine. Like, I just feel like it's a little bit puffy, and there's not enough of the old NSX in it. And the GT is like a mutant amphibian fish version of the previous GT, which was a puffed up version of the original GT. And none of these cars look as nice as any Ferrari, probably, except for the weird 4-wheel drive one.
The Ferrari LaFerrari?
No, the one with 4-wheel drive that looks like a shoe.
Isn't that the FF?
Yeah.
That 4-wheel drive was weird, though. Did you see how that worked? Did we talk about that at some point?
Yeah, it is weird.
Didn't it suck?
No, I don't think it sucked.
Oh, I don't know. Do you think anyone's ever driven one in the snow yet?
That's true. No, but it basically, didn't it have like a second drive shaft coming out the front of the motor or something along those lines?
Yeah, it was a really weird layout.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, that one, if you just don't look at the back of the car, even the front of that car is much nicer. But I think they're making, like I said on the patch show, they're making a not like a regular shaped version of a non like hatchback or whatever you want to call the thing. So it's basically, you're going to have two 12-cylinder front engine Ferraris. Why are they different? Well, this one is 4-wheel drive, and it used to be really ugly. You can get an ugly version if you like ugly cars.
Whatever.